when we last met, it was, I don't know if you remember, it was in Cabo Polmo, and I was there with the Rolex group. And I think you and I were the only divers other than Kip. Um,
And
but
there's a great school of
what
what are
were
they called?
those? Silver sides or some kind of
Fishermen will call
sardines or
them bait fish.
yeah,
That's a
right.
terrible name for them, but
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
like an avalanche of silver. And
yeah,
the grouper that
yeah,
were gathered around,
yeah,
it was,
yeah,
I
yeah. It,
I
it
just
was
was,
amazing.
man.
I haven't been back there since. My wife, we were there many years ago, and she wants to go back. And I've heard the shark population's really booming there, and the people are seeing orcas more regularly, and that's such a success story. So
Well,
amazing.
it really is. I think particularly because the local people there, including the fishermen, did what you like to think that scientists do. They observe carefully and then they report honestly what they see.
Yeah.
And instead of just, well, they did actually for years could drive until the population of fish that they were after vanished. They went further and further offshore, but then they
Mm,
were just basically gone. And
yeah.
as witnesses, they decided to try to do something about it. Often it doesn't work out that way. They just continue to do the same old thing. With
Yeah.
the whalers,
Yeah.
the Yankee whalers, they just went all the way to the Galapagos to get
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
beyond to
Yeah.
find.
Antarctica and yeah,
Mhm.
gosh.
Just crazy. But good, I mean, bravo for
Yeah.
Cabo Pullman community. However, having said that, not everyone in that region is convinced. And in fact, during my last visit to Cabo Pullman, after we were there together, there was a big collection of dead sharks
Huh.
early one morning that
Huh.
fishermen, not all the fishermen had reformed. Some of the fishermen are sticking to
Hmm.
their own ways. And, I've never seen a mako
Hmm.
in the ocean alive, but there was one dead in the collection that they had.
Oh
Five
no.
species in a boat that they were just finning. And
Oh
then
my
they
gosh.
put the bodies
Oh
back
my
in the ocean.
gosh.
It was really sad.
Wow. Right in town there, or was it?
Right on the edge. It was in the
Oh,
reserve, but they said
yeah.
that they caught them outside the reserve.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
fish don't know
Is
where the
is
boundaries are.
is what you described as the success story of Cabo Pulmo the ideal scenario that you'd like to see with the hope spots and other places around the world? Is that the ideal situation where industry changes and people's awareness, they kind of observe and react accordingly? I mean, is that the way that things will reverse on a large scale, do you think?
Well, I think that we're all witnesses to the greatest era of change in the history of humankind, change, environmental change.
Yeah.
And scientists aren't alone. The kids certainly are champions for looking ahead to the consequences of what we do now and what it is doing to their future. But most importantly, the knowledge that now exists that did not and could not exist well when I was a child. It just didn't.
Yeah.
Everything from knowing what Earth looks like from space to realizing that everything really does connect.
Yeah.
That the dusts of the Sahara fly across the Atlantic and land on the coral reefs in Bonaire,
Yeah. Yeah.
continue on, darken the snows of Colorado, and continue.
Yeah.
Everything connects so that the fires in wherever they are, California or Australia or in the Amazon, affect the whole world. And we're we're just beginning to understand that good news anywhere is good news everywhere, and similarly, bad news is. So I, it's not yet kind of universally in the minds and hearts of everybody, but there's a growing, maybe it's not quite a critical mass yet, but I think we're getting there with people
Mm-hmm.
understanding that what they do matters
Mm-hmm.
And you ask if the current, if the Cabo Pomo situation is ideal, I would say whatever it takes. In some
Hmm.
cases,
Yeah.
it's a kid who
Yeah. Yeah.
gets
Yeah.
the community to turn around. Sometimes it's an as something that starts at the top,
Hmm.
or at least comes down from the top, like the presidential actions in this country, first Bush and later Obama, in embracing the Papahanaumokuakea Marine Reserve.
Hmm. Yeah.
A large portion of the community, especially the native Hawaiians, were largely in favor of that. But some of the commercial fishermen are still trying to turn things around. They just think somehow it's being taken from them, as if they
Yeah.
belong, that the ocean belongs to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing that I think will be transformative, if the understanding, you don't have to invent this because it's just true. Fish are not free. Nature is not free, although we treat it that way. The ocean is full of free groceries. We can just go get them. Anybody can. We don't have to pay for them.
Yeah.
Which is, it sounds really good. It's all free goods. And on a limited basis, we've been able to get away with that, with people feeding their families, their communities, and even forming the basis of a modest economic interest. But once we started to scale up and treat fish as products, or really treat ocean wildlife as money, it's free
Mm.
money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not for food, it's for selling. It's about selling fish for money, or shrimp, or squid, or you name it, oil, gas, anything
Right.
from the ocean. It's not
Right.
free. And even when energy companies have to pay leases for oil and gas extraction, it's just doesn't come close to the value of what they extract. And when you think that it any thought of it being, quotes, sustainable is ridiculous, because it
Hmm.
takes so long for these, call them assets, if you will, to
Yeah.
form, like hundreds of millions of years in some cases.
Yeah.
And even with fish, they don't just recover, bounce back in a season. They have seasonal closures. And I suppose that helps, because anytime that the creatures of the sea get a little break, it's good news. But when we take 30, 40, 50, 100-year-old creatures from the sea, or in some cases, 2-century-old creatures from the sea,
Hmm.
closing it for a season doesn't help all that much. And
Yeah.
yet that's a common policy. Oh, we'll just close it down for a while.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, this brings to mind a lot of different things, but one thing that strikes me is that, I think it was Michael Pollan's book, The Omnivore's Dilemma. And I think it was in that book, early in the book, and he talks about how the face of agriculture has changed, and how,
Oh, yeah.
in the 1800s, for instance, and earlier, you got your food from a farmer or two that served a small town or a local community.
And you always
Now,
have a garden of your own if you had
yeah,
any space at all.
and I think that, obviously that's changed, and it's the same with marine life and the seafood industry, and how
It's become
uh,
an industry.
ship you they fly in things from all over the next day for sushi bars in New York from Japan, etc. And nothing's local. Nobody's buying from their farmer. That's why I love farmers markets and things like that.
Mhm.
But
Absolutely.
it's more of a novelty. It's not the regular thing anymore.
Should be mainstream.
But it makes me also think that, um, it's probably less realistic to try to think, of, I don't want to say shutting down the fishing industry or the seafood industry or whatever you want to call it, because there will always be countries, small communities, coastal communities that rely on fishing as a profession, and seafood or fish as food rather. Let's say an island nation, traditional villages, coastal towns in developing countries, things like this. So
But
I guess
they're
trying to
being,
get those more local, right, is a solution, right?
but it was possible to take some when most of the ocean was protected by its inaccessibility.
Mm-hmm.
There's no part of the ocean that is not accessible today, one way
Yeah.
or another. Much of the ocean is still protected by its inaccessibility, generally speaking. That is, although fishing has gone deeper and deeper and further, that literally fishing fleets can, and mostly they do go everywhere on the globe, from the Arctic
Mm-hmm.
to the Antarctic, but and deeper, now operating thousands of meters below the surface.
Yeah.
And that used to be unrealistic. It's not unrealistic anymore. And when the price of fish goes up, it still makes economic sense, especially with subsidies and especially when the fish themselves are free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And when marketing the fish is assisted by taxpayer supported agencies like NOAA, helping with
Mm-hmm.
the marketing, making the connections, really encouraging the taking of large quantities of ocean wildlife. One other transformative concept, which again, it shouldn't be that hard because it's just true, is ocean life is wildlife. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, to think of it otherwise is just absurd. We
Yeah.
have an awareness that biodiversity, wild animals and plants, the diversity of life is declining significantly, and that is bad news for us because we need the stability that these diverse, robust communities, whether they're forests or deserts or the deep sea, it's part of our life support system and takes all the components functioning to shape that big word that everybody should be wrapping their tongue around, and that's biogeochemistry.
Mm.
That the planet is not just a function of rocks and water. It's a function of living systems that act on the rocks and the water. It's
Yeah.
biogeochemistry
Yeah.
that shapes Earth as this blue miracle in a universe that is otherwise really unfriendly for the likes of us.
Yeah.
We once President Obama made the remark that our highest priority must be to keep the world safe for our children. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
he was thinking guns and things. But security, how do we maintain planetary security,
Yeah.
maintain the fabric of life? The national parks were a great idea early in the 20th century, but they were put in, the concept caught on because largely of the desire to maintain beautiful places for recreation, or because they were really respected as natural works of art that we didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to see destroyed. Now, national parks and protected areas, nature everywhere, has taken on a serious new meaning. It's not a nice thing to do or kind of a luxurious thing to protect nature. It's vital,
Mm-hmm.
our
Yeah.
existence.
Yeah.
And when that finally reaches a critical mass of understanding, it'll be a lot easier for people to embrace land and sea, wildlife, wherever it is, with greater respect. And yeah, people will always eat wildlife from the land, and they always will take some wildlife from the sea. But once it really is understood that our lives, our existence depends on maintaining the integrity of mostly the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the ocean that really occupies most of the planet, most of the living systems are ocean creatures, ocean systems.
Yeah.
And there's life where there's water on Earth. There's water
Yeah.
without life, but no life without water. Where most of life is where most of the water is, and that's the ocean. It's
Yeah.
97% of Earth's water and about 97% of the biosphere. But we treat life in the ocean as seafood. We do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That term,
Right.
seafood, we don't have an equivalent term for land food.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It would be the equivalent of just randomly going to the nearby park, and if you see a wild turkey or even a peregrine falcon
Free.
or a
Yeah.
or a raccoon, you'd just be rounding it up and hauling it
Eating it.
into your truck and taking it home. And yeah. Yeah.
Well, some of that still goes on.
Yeah.
There are hunters who take
Yeah.
wildlife.
Sure.
There, there are not so many commercial hunters. I mean, commercial in terms of scale. There
Hmm.
are paid hunters. It really, and it's a sport. In fact, prizes are given for killing big cats,
Oh,
even
yeah.
in America. Some of this is off line, if you will. It's not legal, but
Hmm.
it is legal to
Yeah.
kill big wild animals still. Bear hunts. I mean,
Yeah.
it's disgraceful, I think. Well,
Yeah.
it's disgraceful, period.
Yeah.
But we're evolving as a species as we look as we really understand people change their ways.
Yeah.
We changed
You
our
know,
ways rather dramatically in 2020, but we understood
yeah.
that our lives were on the line.
True. Yeah.
Maybe when we understand that climate puts our lives on the line and that we need the fabric of life that makes Earth habitable, and the new understanding about follow the carbon. Where is the carbon? Carbon dioxide absorbed by trees, carbon dioxide absorbed by plants and held in the soil. But the heavy lifting is out there in the ocean. Carbon dioxide absorbed by those miniature forests of phytoplankton,
Yeah.
as well as kelp forests and seagrass meadows and mangroves and marshes. But all that carbon then goes into where? Into the zooplankton, into the fish, into the shrimp.
Mm.
The new term for it is blue carbon.
Hmm.
It's an old process, but it's a newly understood
Hmm.
concept that protecting fish in the sea is comparable to protecting the carbon on the land.
Interesting.
The more
Yeah.
fish we keep in the ocean, it's our contribution to holding the planet steady. To
Yeah.
uh, we can we should do everything we can to reduce the emission of carbon through burning of fossil fuels and the burning of forests. But by taking fish out of the ocean, we're burning them too, clear cutting the fish. I mean, when they are eaten, what their
Hmm.
carbon turns to carbon dioxide essentially and is released
Yeah.
into the atmosphere. We burn it as energy.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. True. I'm interested in the, I've long been a fan of the kind of the 1950s and 60s space race, but also how it seemed to also sort of compete for attention in the era in which you were starting to get involved with undersea living and things like this. And there's always
Mhm.
been this sort of competition between space travel and space exploration and undersea exploration. It's not an actual competition, but it always seems like space always wins. And I feel like we're seeing that again. I think you're seeing Jeff Bezos and Branson, jetting off, and everybody's talking about colonizing Mars. And I'm thinking, why would you bother colonizing this planet that's never going to be hospitable and create a bubble to live in and try to figure out how to create oxygen and water, and what all the money and effort that's being spent to look into those solutions, why isn't that being better spent on saving the oceans, exploring the oceans? The oceans are as alien and interesting as anything you're going to find in outer space.
More, more
Why do
interesting.
you why do you think people are just so much more drawn to colonizing Mars and space travel than just the ocean.
Well, the I wish I had an answer for that question. I think we've taken the ocean for granted. We think of it as not extraordinary. Everybody knows that the ocean is there, filled with fish, and we really don't respect life in the ocean for anything more than commodities. It's even whales. Now we know how remarkable whales are,
Mm-hmm.
as with their closely knit societies. They have language. They have intergenerational communication in terms of sharing knowledge over time. Nobody does that better than humans, that we have been sharing knowledge and advancing our civilization over thousands of years. That whales communicate. They don't have libraries. They don't have a place to put knowledge except to pass it along verbally.
Hmm.
Imagine where we would be if we didn't have a means to write things down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
store it in a way that anybody could access it over time.
Right.
But it is a puzzle that while we're trying so hard to figure out how we might be able to terraform Mars,
Yeah.
we were ironically doing everything in our power, it would seem, to Marsiform Earth. We're creating an atmosphere that is richer in carbon dioxide. What's the atmosphere of Mars? It's mostly carbon dioxide.
It's so true. Yeah.
And we're destroying the water systems, land and sea. Oh, where's the water on Mars? We need to, so such a peculiar
Yeah. Yeah.
attribute of humans that
And
we fail
the
to see
irony,
what's obvious.
the irony of using undersea habitation as a training ground, as it has been using Aquarius and other
Yes,
places
exactly.
for astronauts to live in space. It just strikes me as so strange. And every time I go diving, I think to myself, this is the most exotic alien thing I will ever do. It's the most exciting thing anybody can do. Even the most basic discover scuba dive that you do in 30 feet of water. You
But
have your
Jason,
life support on your back, alien creatures. Like anybody can go try this and be fascinated.
when you think like the planet, who's alien?
Yeah. Yeah.
We are.
Yeah.
Most of
Yeah.
life on Earth, the greatest diversity, the greatest abundance, lives in an aquatic
Mm-hmm.
realm. We're the
Yeah.
odd ones.
Yeah.
We're the extreme creatures because we live in an atmosphere that is not water. I mean, there is some water in our air, of course, clouds,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
we carry water around with us.
Yeah.
All living things have water. All living things have carbon. There's some basic concepts that if we can just get the public at large to integrate in their thinking, just the basic knowledge of how the world functions and what a miracle it is that we're here at all,
Mm-hmm.
that we exist at all,
Yeah.
then maybe we'll have greater respect for every living thing.
Yeah.
In the whole universe, there's nothing like it. And you're right, going underwater, you see things you don't see anywhere else. Most of the big divisions of life, great categories of animals and microbes and plants, they're essentially all have some representation in the sea. And there may be some microbial exceptions that are only found that are airborne or live in an atmospheric circumstance. But generally speaking, the whole spectrum, it's like diving into the history of life itself, to dive into the ocean.
Yeah.
And only about 15 of those categories, phyla of animals, occur in all of the land put together. Most people, when they think animal, they think vertebrate, cats, dogs. Maybe they remember that turtles and frogs are vertebrates, creatures with a backbone. They might even remember that fish or vertebrates with a backbone.
Yeah.
But when you think most of life on Earth, they don't have a backbone. You don't.
Hmm.
Jellyfish, where's the backbone? Starfish, you can look and look with no backbone.
Yeah.
No, the
Yeah.
other characteristics that make vertebrates what they are. But
Yeah.
the other miracle is that all life, land and sea, all life, there's a common recipe. The chemistry of life is so basically similar, whether you're talking about a bacterium or an elephant or a bird or whatever it is, a
Yeah.
jellyfish. The chemistry of life follows this basic set of principles. And even when you get to the genetics, the genetic makeup, there's a lot, even though every individual is different, every human,
Hmm.
everybody has a face, everybody has a personality. We're tall, we're short, we're fat, we're skinny, or whatever we are. We're
Yeah.
all different. And so is every fish,
Hmm.
so is every tree,
Yeah.
so is everything that is living today or ever has lived or ever will live, but all share this basic chemistry, which is in itself such a big thought. But
Yeah.
again, it's just true.
Well,
Would
I think, this romance of space travel versus a lack of romance with undersea exploration, I often think to myself, if you could get more people trying diving or spending more time in water or around water, whether it's
right.
sailing, snorkeling, it's what was Cousteau's quote, you protect what you love, and I think because because Rolex helped organize this talk, it makes me think back to when I first started taking interest in wristwatches, and I bought a diving watch,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know how to dive. And I thought, if I wear this watch, I really need to learn how to dive, because otherwise I'm a bit of a poser. So I
Yeah.
learned how to dive, and it led to a whole career. I now my niche is writing about dive watches and taking them diving, and my wife takes the photos.
Hermit.
Oh, the Kermit, the Submariner. Yeah. Not your date just this time. and I think to myself, in a small way, writing articles about diving watches and showing them underwater is a bit nerdy and very niche. But if the people that read these stories um, take interest in that, and if a few of them decide they want to start diving, then
Whatever it takes. My
they
quote
get
is,
underwater, and then they start saying,
yep.
"Oh, Jason did an interview with Sylvia Earle. Let's see what she's all about." Oh, you know, I feel like just getting more people interested in the ocean will then naturally start to draw interest. It's a big task, of course.
I often say no child left dry,
Yeah,
but every that should be true of everybody.
yeah, yeah,
Dive in.
yeah, yeah. Because it's so fascinating, and you do take interest. You do start to
It's your
love
planet, for heaven's sakes.
fish. Yeah, yeah. I wonder, have you seen? There was a recent film. I think we spoke about him when we met in Mexico. Will Steger. Um, there was a recent documentary about his life called After Antarctica, and it's been making the rounds of the film festivals. And it really reminded me of a more terrestrial version of Mission Blue, the movie that about your life. Have you seen that film yet?
I have not. It's
Oh, it's
on
it's
my
tremendous.
bucket list. Will was the very first National Geographic Explorer in residence. I was
Mm.
the third.
Huh.
In between was Johann um, Reinhardt, who
Huh.
studied the ice maiden
Huh.
in in Peru,
Okay.
an ethnologist.
Huh.
And
Huh.
and since then, there have been quite an amazing list of explorers in
Yeah.
residence at
Yeah.
Nat Geo.
But
And
I have such respect for Will, and I kind of consider you and Will kind of a couple of heroes of mine. And I think what's been interesting about watching your two careers and backgrounds is that you both and correct me if I'm wrong. Well, I guess you came from a science background as well, but this idea of exploring, going to the deepest parts of the ocean, for him, it's going to the poles,
Yes,
turning that into a very conservation minded approach. And nowadays he's very passionate about global warming, and he's seen the effects of global warming in Antarctica, just as you have spent so much time in the ocean and have now turned to what you're doing now. And
once you know, you can't unknow, and
yeah,
it drives me to really want to share the view and get people to be aware. It really is the key. You can't, you might care, you might know and not care, but you cannot care if you don't know.
yeah,
Right now, the knowledge is there. It's our superpower.
mm-hmm,
We know what's going on. Imagine how smart whales are, and dolphins and elephants, and we both met some smart fish, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah,
but but they cannot know what even the kids of today know, that could not be known even by the smartest human beings who were around when I was a kid. Nobody knew. But it's the knowledge that has been accumulating more rapidly in the last half century or so than during any time in the past. And we're communicating more rapidly with technologies that enable us to talk like we're talking now,
yeah,
and to share the knowledge as quickly as it becomes known. The information about the pandemic, the virus started on one side of the planet, that even before it reached the other side of the planet, people were on full alert. It's coming. We know it's coming. Be prepared.
yeah,
That, but imagine if we didn't know.
yeah,
And until right about now, we could not know. And so it's I think the best time to be a human being, actually,
hmm,
because of that capacity to understand what no one could see before. Or even if they could see it, they'd be pretty lonely. I mean, I feel pretty lonely as it is, but
mm-hmm,
also witnessed a scaling up of awareness, going back to when President George W. Bush signed into law the Papahanaumokuakea Marine Reserve. It was the largest marine reserve on the planet. But that means that it was still a tiny fraction of 1% of the ocean was proactively protected. From
hmm,
that point to where we are now, it's been a fairly rapid increase. That is to say, we now have about 3%, which is still not nearly where we must be if we
yeah,
are to reverse the planetary decline, and with a particular reference to the runaway climate change.
yeah,
Stabilizing climate means stabilizing nature, and that means we've got to stop the killing as much as we can,
yeah,
and really amp up the caring. And the
yeah,
hope spot concept was really directed at, back to our conversation about communities and local champions. Um, we'll work however we can at whatever level is possible, but it is vital that we connect with the people as close to where these areas are, the hope spots in the ocean, because they have enhanced power to do something about whatever the problems are. And half the world is high seas, more than the area beyond national jurisdiction. And a few nations with the capacity to get out beyond 200 miles into the high seas to exploit it for whatever reasons. For years ago, it was whaling, would take
mm-hmm,
people out to the high seas and beyond. And technically, the waters around Antarctica are not owned by any one nation, because Antarctica is not owned by any one nation. So it's international waters. And
yeah,
top of the world, there's a chunk of the ocean that is high seas.
Hmm.
If we can get nations to pull together, and that means communities that get it and understand we have to protect the ocean as if not just our livelihoods, but our lives depend on it. We might pull together regionally, but internationally around the high seas, and to make it really cool to protect the ocean, and to
Yeah.
make it really seem like you're not doing your part.
Yeah.
What's wrong
Yeah.
with you? Or to
Yeah.
say our our marine protected area is bigger than yours. Like you talked about the space race. We can
Yeah.
do an ocean race for
Yeah.
greater degrees of protection.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, right now, some of the small island nations are ahead of the game in terms of percentages. Like Palau has 80% of their
Wow.
exclusive economic zone,
Wow.
while Easter Island is not a nation unto itself. It's part of governed by Chile. Um, Chile as a nation has really stepped up there with about 40%.
Hmm.
Easter Island is entirely protected,
Hmm.
except for the local fishermen who use traditional means, not the ups, upscale methods of GPS and using helicopters to find where the tuna are and things like that.
Hmm.
Traditional means locally consumed. So their privilege, if you will, of taking for local consumption is protected. And
Yeah.
because waters out 200 miles are protected, they'll probably have plenty. It's
Yeah.
like keeping your basic endowment intact. You spin off a little bit, but you keep the basic principle intact
Sure.
and
Yeah.
use the interest, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's any excess in the ocean ever, but if you scratch it a little bit and take a bit here and there, but protect most of it,
Yeah.
chances are we can do that.
Yeah.
But we can't do it now because it is in such trouble. And 90% of most of the big fish gone. Every shrimp
Hmm.
counts. And
Yeah.
certainly when you think of how much has been lost so quickly, that the bluefin tuna in the Pacific are down to about 3% since the
Wow.
1970s.
Wow.
The
Wow.
mako sharks in the Atlantic, the short fin mako, I mean, if you can see even one, it's like a fraction of 1%.
Hmm.
Might still be
Man.
there. And the oceanic white tips globally are in serious trouble too. They used to be among the most common of sharks.
So on the one hand, you said a while ago that you this is the best time to be alive, or the best time in history to be alive or be a person, or
Yeah,
I can't remember how
absolutely.
you phrased it. But on the other hand, how do you maintain? Do you consider yourself an optimist? I mean, do you see a trend that this will reverse, and that you have faith in humankind that will turn the
Well, I'd
corner
say
on this stuff eventually?
I see that it is. I mean, I could get really depressed. I mean,
Yeah.
you could give up and say, as I have heard some even CEOs of major companies who see the major decline, they see the problems coming around, and they and I've had conversations with them, some of them, and they say, I don't look, it's hopeless. I'm going to enjoy myself. The kids will figure it out for themselves. I'm
Mm,
not going to
yeah.
worry about their
Mm,
future. I'm going to be concerned about the time I have. Great. If
mm,
everyone felt that way, imagine where we'd
yeah.
be in the 21st century, going back through time. If everyone said it's all about me,
Yeah.
I don't care about my kids. But the good news is people do care about
Hmm.
the future for their kids. They want them to have a better life. And that is generally the case. We want to protect the future for the next generation. You care about your kids, your grandkids, and more, there are people with great grandkids, and they can see the future through their eyes. And they don't want to see a world less positive than what we now have. And we have to, those of us who do care have to carry the burden for those who don't. It's getting to
Right.
that level of positive, not just thinking, but acting. If you think it's impossible, or if you don't care, it will be impossible
Yeah.
because you don't do
Yeah.
anything. You just
Yeah.
give up. I'm
Yeah.
never going to give up because it's like the hero's journey. There are all these obstacles that keep the hero from winning. And then finally there's a breakthrough and
Yeah. Yeah.
the end of the story is success. Well,
Yeah.
I'm looking for that this is the heroic generation that will break through the obstacles and there will be a change. It is happening. It's just not happening quite fast enough to feel secure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody talked about climate change as a headline issue 20 years ago. There were some who got it and
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about it, but it was not in everyday conversations. It is now,
Yeah. That's true. That's something to be optimistic about, I guess, is
especially
awareness. And yeah.
when you use that awareness, that knowledge, and then put it to work. What can I do?
Hmm. Yeah.
What can I do individually about the choices I make, about the leaders we put into office who are making the rules on our behalf?
Yeah.
Get those who are concerned about the future and are taking action, not just about the future of business, but the future of business is totally at risk if we don't have a healthy environment. I mean, somebody said you can't count your money if you're holding your breath. I mean, the air
Yeah.
is is precious, and where does it come from? People
Right.
haven't thought about that much before, but
Yeah.
the air is generated by the living systems that we're consuming faster than they can recover.
Yeah. Say, when was the last time you were able to go diving? This has been a strange couple of years. Hmm?
During a bounce trip to the Azores, the
Oh, well, you
mid-Atlantic.
did dive there. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
And it's a wonderful planet, a part of the planet. The mid-Atlantic ridge was not known when I was a child or when Rachel Carson wrote The Sea Around Us. In 1951, it was published, 10
Huh.
years before Silent Spring.
Hmm. Hmm.
Think of the
Huh.
knowledge that has come about just in
Yeah.
in a single lifetime.
Yeah.
And more
Yeah.
is coming. It's coming. It's like a race. We're learning more faster than ever before, but we're losing more faster than ever before.
Yeah.
But the there is time.
Hmm.
That is the good news. Not a lot, but the climate scientists are suggesting the next 10 years as the most at about the amount of time that we have to seriously do what it takes to reverse decline before we reach those tipping points that are really beyond our control to put back into some kind of harmony. We're we're already doing it in some ways with plastics. Uh, What do we do about the not just the big chunks of plastic, but the microplastics, the nanoplastics that are
Hmm.
pervasive in the air, the water, the food we eat, the in our bodies? How do
Yeah.
you get them out once they're there?
Yeah.
We can and thank goodness people are beginning to use our mighty powers to clean up beaches and to go out and retrieve the tons of thousands of tons of lost fishing gear, long lines, nets, that not only cause damage when they're being actively used, but they stick around for, well, plastics don't degrade very readily, and when they do, they degrade into smaller pieces, right down to the molecular level. And the great majority of fishing gear today is made of plastic. And not
Hmm.
only does it entangle hundreds of thousands of creatures, from whales to birds to fish that are unintentionally killed every year, every day, every minute, but it just keeps going as long as that gear stays intact, but then breaks into small pieces that persists and is part of the source of microplastics and nanoplastics that are consumed by the microorganisms in the ocean, plankton, that then are consumed by the fish, that are consumed by the squid, by us when we eat them.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure how we're going to put that problem behind us, except to do everything we can to stop new sources from going into our life support system.
The other ironically troubling piece of information I've come across in the past few years is the idea of, everybody likes the idea of electric cars, but one thing I recently learned was that some of the minerals, or is that the right word? I guess the minerals that are required to make the batteries and better batteries, they're now finding that deep sea mining is an option, is a viable option. They're saying that, scraping we're talking thousands and thousands of feet deep, scraping what they call these nodules of rock that are mineral rich on the ocean floor. And it's become this bit of a race to do that. So the irony is, of course, they're saying, well, electric cars are the answer to global warming, getting people off of fossil fuels. But then to get some of these minerals, they have to scrape the bottom of the ocean and
No, we don't have to do that at all.
yeah,
That's a great illusion. It's
yeah.
marketing. It's it's a marketing campaign that should be stopped. I mean, the whole concept, it's disinformation, misinformation, claiming that there's not much down there to be destroyed. Well, diverse life, the rocks, manganese nodules themselves, they're not just dead stones, they're living
Hmm.
rocks.
Yeah.
You look at a coral reef, it looks like the corals are just some physical structure. No, they're alive.
Yeah.
Well, these manganese nodules are alive with bacteria.
Mm.
They're
Yeah.
growing. They've
Yeah.
been growing for millions of years, and they're still growing. So it's really on our, and they grow around something organic, like the ear bone of a fish
Oh yeah.
or the tooth of a shark, uh,
Hmm.
something that enables the bacteria to establish, and they extract from the surrounding seawater these materials that we find useful. It's
Oh,
nickel,
interesting.
cobalt,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
a
Hmm.
whole suite of things. We call them manganese nodules because manganese is one of the elements that tends to be fairly abundant, but they're largely iron.
Mm.
And mining has been discussed since the late 1970s. And can they be extracted from the deep sea? Well, some of them are already being extracted, but it's at great cost, not only to get there in the first place because they're mostly in significantly deep water,
Mm.
more than well, a couple of kilometers down
Yeah.
for the most part, but some deeper, some somewhat less deep, but they're in the deep sea. And technically, only about now have we been able to master the fine art of deploying bulldozer-like machinery in the deep sea to be able to plow the ocean floor to scrape these living rocks. But the idea is to then crush them, extract what we currently want, and discard the rest. And one of the lines from some of those who the mining interests say, we'll just take what we want and we'll put the rest back. So no harm done. It's like saying, we're just going to crush New York City and take out the fire plugs and the taxi cabs, and we'll just put it back, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So
Yeah.
you've crushed Wall Street, you've crushed the museums, you've crushed the people.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's so that's the part that people say, oh, well, that sounds good to me. We'll just put back most of it. We'll just take what we want. There's no
Yeah.
idea. It's misinformation, disinformation. It's marketing, a lie. And do we need those minerals for batteries? The current state of the art batteries, lithium is a product, a metal that is widespread use, and there are sources on the land. But what's the best source? The minerals already extracted. We need to stop this habit of thinking that we need to continue carving up the earth constantly to get what they call virgin material, new material, constantly, when we have already destroyed big chunks of the planet to get at these minerals. And much of it is in a more distilled form, sitting in landfills all over the world. We
Yeah.
should
Yeah.
find them first.
Yeah. True.
And we should make it really easy to get into the habit of recycling your batteries, recycling your cell phones, instead of just tossing them away. Take responsibility, make sure that they are not wasted, that the refined metals that already exist in a concentrated form, much more concentrated than they are in the bottom of the ocean, that will be taken, if they're taken at all, in large commercial quantities. It's just get real.
Yeah.
I think of that great film Avatar that
Hmm.
James Cameron
Yeah.
produced.
Yeah.
You might remember the bad guys were after unobtainium.
Right.
It
Yeah.
was under the tree of life,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they were bent on just destroying the living forest and the culture of the people to get to the unobtainium for their
Yeah.
what they thought of as their needs.
Yeah.
Well, we come from a terrestrial place and we think that we own the planet and that we've run roughshod over all other forms of life throughout our history. It's only now that we're beginning to understand that we need other forms of life. We need nature. We need a system that is working in our favor. And the way, in ignorance, we have destroyed so much of the fabric of life, the old growth forests, the intact desert systems, the area that we've converted for whatever purpose, for farming, for our industrial places, the highways, the cities, whatever it is. And now we're converting the ocean in ways just mindlessly, as if it doesn't matter. Life will go on. Well, in a parallel course to this continued mindset of we must continue taking, consuming nature to foster our prosperity, our wealth, our habits, whatever it is. There's this other race of knowledge that we have to change. We have to respect nature. We have to protect the old growth forests. We must not let those assets, but we must look at all of nature more as a library than as a bank of free goods, a place where we
Yeah.
just take stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
without consequences.
Yeah.
That used to be the way we thought about whales, about trees, about fish. We got to get those trees out of the way so we can plant our city there, or to plant tobacco, or to plant corn, or to plant whatever we want. And without respecting the gopher tortoises that lived in peace until we came along, burrowed in the ground with their whole communities of life that really took advantage of the big tortoises that made their underground passages and shared space with dozens of other organisms. Or to think about a tree that is home not just for the tree itself, but for countless creatures, little furry things and birds and insects, frogs, the whole And we
Yeah.
just think of them as a tree in our way of where we want to put a road, or where we want to put a gas station, or where we want to do something. We
Yeah.
have no respect for all these creatures who precede us by, hundreds of millions of years. And we think that we own everything. And now we're understanding that we're just a part of a system that doesn't need us, but we need them.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I mentioned that it was a dive watch that got me into diving and ocean conservation and that sort of thing. And for you, when you started diving, I'm guessing a watch was something that you wore as an instrument, to track your bottom time or experiments or things you were doing.
I,
And
I
and
was I was horrified once when a friend of mine, I saw this beautiful watch she was wearing. And we were down about 60 feet underwater.
yeah, yeah,
She had this beautiful gold watch on.
yeah.
And I looked at it, I pointed at it, and I gave this horrified expression. You didn't dive with a watch that looked like that.
Yeah,
You take a shower, you take off your watch.
yeah.
She just got this smug look on her face. She had a Rolex.
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was it was it was a beautiful watch that you could wear anywhere, but you could wear it underwater. Of course, you
Yeah,
could wear it in the shower.
yeah, yeah,
That's the
yeah,
wonderful thing about the Rolex. It wasn't designed to be a diving watch.
yeah.
It served the purpose. She just she said, I just never take it off. Why
Sure.
would I? I can
Yeah,
take it anywhere.
yeah. But it's interesting that then your relationship evolved from wearing something just anywhere and everywhere, as well as to time things and use while you're diving, into this relationship that you developed with the company itself. That
Right.
is now this very symbiotic relationship. You represent them to a certain degree, and then they support Mission Blue.
Well, they support across the board uh, the the good side of human society, if you will,
Yeah,
music, art, health,
yeah,
um, uh, with their awards for enterprise, for solutions to problems, but they celebrate excellence,
hmm,
whether it's in tennis or
yeah,
in other sports.
yeah,
And it's exciting to be associated with an organization that is so beneficial to human society. Really,
yeah, yeah,
they support so many worthy causes, much of it having to do with exploration. They partner with National Geographic, they partner with the Explorers Club,
hmm,
and they certainly have partnered with Mission Blue
yeah,
to help us to further exploration. Did I say conservation? Conservation heroes
yeah,
are supported by Rolex, and they have done so for many decades. So it's a natural alliance. And
and I think
recently,
their watches too are such a symbol of sustainability, right? I mean, they're intergenerational. They last
yep,
forever. They're wound by the movement of your body.
yep,
You know,
one of those
unlike say an Apple Watch or something that is disposable by and large. So it's a very
requires
fitting
batteries.
sort of symbol. Yeah, right. Yeah,
And more than that, they're true instruments.
hmm,
You really do.
yeah,
I do. You do rely on it
yeah,
for measuring time underwater.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's an it's you need air, but you also need to measure how much time, and it needs to be accurate.
yeah,
You can't fool the laws of nature. You
yeah, yeah,
have to listen to them and abide by them.
right.
And the chronometer, the
Yeah,
timepiece is is such a vital instrument. And when I think watches didn't exist throughout most of human history,
yeah,
dictionaries of
yeah,
those who over time really began to figure out how to effectively measure it, and now to carry a sophisticated instrument on my arm
Yeah. Yeah.
is really such a gift.
Yeah. Yeah.
National Geographic, I mean, Rolex has worked with me and National Geographic to support a new book called Ocean: A Global Odyssey
Hmm.
that is coming out in November,
Huh.
where I'll make sure you get one
Hmm.
because there's a big
Yeah.
chunk, a big part of it is about the history of ocean exploration and
Huh.
dive.
Oh, amazing.
It starts with talking about the history of the ocean itself.
Yeah.
Where did it come from?
Yeah.
What is water anyway? And
Yeah.
then the big section in the middle is about life in the ocean, how extraordinary it is. And then the final piece is about our relationship to the ocean and things such as climate and pollution and marine protected areas.
Hmm. Huh.
With every chapter features a hope spot.
Wow.
So
Is that being published through Mission Blue, or is that a Rolex produced project,
it's
or
National Geographic,
no? No, National Geographic. Okay. Oh,
but with
great.
support from
Yeah.
Rolex, hope make it happen.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, Sylvia, I don't want to, take up more of your time. This was a wonderful hour, and just so fun to catch up with you again, and so happy to see you. And yeah, this
Let's
was
go back to
fantastic.
Cabo Pulmo or the
Yeah,
Azores.
I would
There
love
are
to.
140 hope spots now. So we have a big choice of places to go splash around. And maybe we can go to a place that needs to be a hope spot that hasn't yet been.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, my wife is from Sri Lanka, and so we try to dive there whenever we go, and it's always interesting to see the ups and downs of the marine ecosystem whenever we're there, because we try to dive all around the different coastlines. I don't know if you have any hope spots in that part of the world, maybe the Maldives or something.
And we are planning to, well, we were planning an expedition before COVID,
Yeah,
struck, but we
yeah,
will go back largely, well, the whole system, but it's a favorite place for blue whales
yes,
now. So
yeah,
we have a researcher who really wants to go there and in the name of Hope Spot and hope for the
oh,
whales and hope for the
oh, that's
region,
great.
hope for the world.
Yeah, yeah. There's Asha DeVos is a well-known marine biologist who's lives there, and she's been a real. I think she's a National
Right.
Geographic,
Yeah.
maybe emerging explorer or something.
Right.
She's quite well known there, but yeah, it's a lovely place. So maybe we'll have to meet there and dive sometime.
Okay. Maybe we should have a little talk with Rolex about.
I will do that. Yeah, you do too, please. You have more pull than I do.